Okay. Good afternoon. Hello. Let me let everybody in. Right. Just letting everyone in. Let's give it a couple minutes. Right. We're almost ready.
Hi.
A lot of people. All right. I think we have it. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay.
Afternoon.
Can you all hear me fine? All right. So, folks, I've been a little bit under the weather today. I'm okay, nothing serious, none of the big dramas of the day, but I'm a little bit sick, so I'm going to do my best today. I just want to say in advance so that you know if I don't seem particularly as sharp as I hope I generally am, you know why. All right. Okay. Um, let's jump right into it. So today's big goal is a proper look at the final third project, and after that, a tiny introduction to the last project. Let me let that person in. I have a quick question for you, though, that's on my mind. Um, have we touched on clipping masks yet? Does that ring a bell for anybody? Clipping masks? No, I didn't think so. So that's the one technology I want to do today. It's light. I think you'll be interested, not particularly exhausting. So what we're going to do is get a look at everybody's work, wrap up the third project, get this little tiny technology that I've been wanting to squeeze in called clipping masks. I'll tell you more about that later. I think a lot of you are going to want to know how to use a clipping mask in Adobe Illustrator. And then I'm going to introduce the last project of the semester. All right, folks, I do want to say, other than being a little under the weather, there's been some very serious drama around my house, and I'm not going to impose on you, but I didn't get to your email. So I imagine some of you probably sent me last minute email about Project 3, and there was literally no way to get there. So I will read your email, but it's not likely to happen today. I just want to say very, very quickly, these are strange days, as we all know. 2020 is hard to beat on the strangeness meter, and I'm open-minded. So if people are finding themselves in any situation, uh, COVID related, Zoom related, etc., that's interfered with your grades, you need to let me know about it. If you haven't already, you have to send me a thoughtful email. Tell me which class you're in. You know, in other words, you could just say the Monday class, for example, and tell me what's on your mind while I still have time to act. The end of the semester is going to be here in a blink. So if anybody is stuck, they have to let me know, and I could honestly let you know whether there's still room, whether we could turn anything around. The majority of this class is doing very well. Don't be alarmed. I'm talking to any individual who might have had less luck this semester. So for now, I'm going to go right to screen sharing, get a quick look at the handout, see what we may need to discuss, and then we're going to get to look at your work. Nothing new here today. There are no assets today. I've mentioned that there's tutoring options a number of times. I just want to make people very aware of it. There's the link to discover anything you need. The YouTube list, I'm pretty certain, is completely up to date. And my offer for revisions, it remains true. If you've given me a project on time and at any point you want to redo it, follow this simple set of instructions how to name it. Guys, I do want to say something though. This link that I offer you all the time is the same link right to our only Google Drive that we're using the whole semester. If it's revisions though, you look inside once you're in there for a folder called revisions, open it and drop your work in there. The work that's due today just goes in the usual Google Drive link. So, all right, If you've not put your work in, this is your last chance, right? To get that in on time, right? This is the way it should be named. Now, I do want you to notice, though, that some of you needed to give me a packaged file. That's fine. This would be the name of the package, right? If you're just giving me the .ai, the document itself, all by itself, it's the same name, but .ai, right? So either way you gave it to me, it's fine. I do need Illustrator files for this. I know some of you give me PNGs or JPEGs to make it easier during the critique. By the way, I really do appreciate that. I may even make it required for my class next year, you know. But ultimately, though, I do need a whole of the .ai file somewhere, right? Because if there's any reason I need to go into it, it's going to be the Illustrator file that I dive in. All right. So I'm going to assume that everybody's already got it in there, right? And if not, put it in while I talk. We're going to start in just a couple minutes. Enough time to get it in there if you've yet to do that. You know, so there's a few things that come up on every critique. There are a few things that are different. You know, I want to say one thing about this particular project, though. It's extremely low concept. You know, it really is a massive technical exercise by and large. You know, there's no philosophy to it. There's no elaborate communication like there was. There's no communication like there was, say, in the ideogram project. You know, 6 to 8 steps. I had to get what those steps were. Uh, you know, so it's very tech. I would say the only thing beyond just the your ability to render an object from several views is how you laid it out on the page. You know, some people had very little adventure there, laid it out bluntly, and it looked beautiful anyway. Some people laid it out bluntly, and it didn't look so beautiful. Some people had a little bit of adventure of how they fit their 4 views together. We'll see if that plays in a big way in a matter of minutes. Does anybody have any last minute question for me before I start? No? All right, let's have a look. All right, I'm going to go right into our drive from here. You know, I do want to say one quick thing before we start looking at all the new work. I do want to point out the difference between 2 folders. Somebody had asked me about it, just to be clear. On my screen, you can see there's this purple revisions folder. And all of you who hand your work in on time, you could put a new version in there anytime you like. You'll see a lot of people have taken advantage of it. All these ones with stars means I've already reviewed them and graded them. I could see I got some new ones. Big thumbs up to you, ambitious people. So if anyone has revisions for me, that's the way to be sure it's graded. If you ever put something in one of these old gray folders, I'm not going to look in there again. Can't expect me to look in every folder. That's why I have it so organized. So it's just revisions for old work. If the work's just flat out late, I never got a given project, this is the folder for it. You know, and that would be just the last project. If you miss the first project, that door is kind of closed, unless you make a tremendous argument in an email to me. But this is for late work. All right, let's just dive in. All right. So we're taking a look at Sean's work here, and you know, I have to say, you know, on the first look, it's impressive. You know, it's nicely rendered. This object looks like I could pick it up in my hand. I like the layout too, as simple as it is. He made the choice to have one view bigger than the others. And what I like about the way, Sean, that you handled that. Sean, where are you? Oh, there you
Right
are.
here.
I see you. You know, the one you chose to blow up doesn't confuse me.
Mhm.
And so it's clearly a design decision, and it's something that I want to say to everybody. When you take in a leap of faith, you know, a little poetic license visually, right? The trick is make sure your audience can see that, so that they're not at all confused. Like, why is one larger in this very industrial kind of project? So his is very, very clear. So I appreciate that, because it really did make the page more interesting. It's even worth noticing that the side view with the narrow ears happens to look great between these other 2 views, as well as a beautiful background color. Sean, I got a fast question for you. I'm just sort of curious about the
Mhm.
object itself. What was it made out of?
I don't know. I have it right here. It's like this like squishy material. I'm not sure what it exactly is, but it like squishes when I like
So it's probably some kind of rubber.
yeah.
That's interesting. So it's interesting that he just held it up. We all got to look at it. You know, the weird thing about the way that object's been painted, you know, industrially, you know, colored, is it kind of hides its material. You know, the reason I asked you is because I couldn't tell from your drawing what kind of material it was. So
Mhm.
it's one of the things comes up in this project, but honestly, picking up the device, the thing, the subject, I
Mhm.
couldn't tell either. So it just means you were very loyal to this object. So I have to say, I think you did a very good job. You have a lot of skill, and that
Thank you.
shows. I just want to say real quickly before we look at this other one, completely different material, right? That skill. It's interesting thing. In my classes, I so wish I had you all for a part 2. I really wish there was vector graphics too. Because if there was next semester, it would be largely concept driven, you know, concept driven, because you guys have collected so much technique. The trick is to see what you would do with it when you let loose. By the way, the last project is very concept driven. So we have one project left, and it's going to be a lot about the way your imagination and your intellect work together. But we're going to talk more about that at the end. So this one right here, Sarah's, strikes me as wooden, and I'm just sort of curious. So I have to ask her, Sarah, where are you?
I'm right here.
So what's it made out of?
It is wood.
It is wood. Oh, so that's
I
why you're
just blew
smiling
it.
so much. So she clearly communicated that, right? So you don't have to say though, she could have easily told me, oh, it's faux wood. You all know that word faux. I see it. It's very, very folk looking, this thing. But the word faux is spelled F-A-U-X, and we think of it as just fake. So there's so many things that are fake wood. I've seen plastic toys that have wood grain on them. So I didn't know what Sarah was going to say, if that was going to be real wood or not. I was kind of curious because you notice there's no wood grain on it, right? But it's clearly carved. This is very, very convincing. It really looks like the kind of thing an old whaling, sailor, would have carved out a piece of wood to keep himself interesting. The one thing I want to say to you, Sarah, and this will get a high grade, so it's nothing to worry about. But when people look at this or outside of the class, they're going to scratch their head about this one, right? And we all know, it's clearly a top view. And after you look at the guy's hat 3 times, you can tell. So I'm sure this is very, very loyal, the way this top view is. I have to say though, if we were going to use this for something, you and I would probably have a meeting and think, what can we add to this page just to make that one feel a little less weird? You know, like even if someone gets what it is, the design is so odd. These 3 pillars and then boop, this one little thing. So I don't know. We would have to think way out of the box, right? There was nothing in the assignment that was going to satisfy that. Some of you may be thinking, oh, just make that one larger. But I think that might be even weirder. It would give it more weight. So yeah, we could rearrange the page, but it would just be so odd to have that one particularly that view extra large, because it's not the most important or most, fascinating view. So I don't know. Yeah. Does anyone have a brilliant idea like what you would do to this page to just keep those illustrations because they're so good, but make the page feel stronger?
My
Yeah,
first
Juliana.
thought was turning it vertical and kind of staggering them a little bit, and then there would be one spot with a little empty space, and it would fit right in there.
So you mean turn the whole page vertically?
Mm-hmm.
She's clever, this one. I could kind of see that. It'd be interesting, right? Because it'd be a vertical page with these 3 prominent vertical objects. It'd be pretty interesting to see, like she said, to scatter them so they wouldn't be neatly lined up. That might work very nicely. And even though the assignment did have this width, I did mention anyone, if they wanted to, they can make it vertically. Other than that, you could have whipped out some text and said something about this object and use that as a design element. Maybe have it under there. I don't know. There's a number of solutions. I think this is a terrific job, though. It was a particularly difficult element. The rendering, though, which was the heart of the project, worked well. And by the way, I just want to add about that last one. The background color worked great. And that really does matter. Let's take a look at Rachel's. This one also just looks really, really professional, really strong. The one thing that's on my mind most is it feels more like an animated character of this object than an object in the 3-dimensional world. So I'm going to ask Rachel a couple questions about it, try to figure out, why that is. Rachel, where are you? I see you. Rachel, what's it made out of?
It's made out of hard plastic.
Hard plastic. Do you happen to have it next to you? Can I see it?
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah. This is different since we're on Zoom, right? Back in the physical world next year, I may ask people to bring it in. Oh, I see. It's another one of these where the material is like incomprehensible. There's no way to tell from looking at it what the material is. So I would say this to you, Rachel, though. I really like these drawings. You show a lot of skill in Illustrator. I'm very excited to see what you're going to do in the next project. The colors look fantastic. This far less than obvious pale greenish color in the background just looks great. I don't know, it has some cool relationship with the shadows on the object, I think. I'm kind of wondering about the oval underneath it. I know that's a little bit, it's like cartoonist and animator shorthand for shadow, right? Those little ovals at the bottom. Is that what it is? These ovals are the shadow?
Yeah.
So I think in your case, the fact that that object doesn't have an obvious material made it feel like a character rather than a rendering. And then you added the oval, which made it feel even more like a character as opposed to a real world rendering. Do you see what I'm saying?
I can see that.
Right. So I have to say, you'll get a high grade in this because I think it looks great. You did a really good job. But that one thing stops this from feeling like you're drawing a real three-dimensional object from the world. And I'll bet you anything that if you show this to friends or other people, they're all going to tell you what a beautiful drawing it is and utterly be surprised that it was actually a rendering of an object.
I just thought the shadow was a nice touch to it.
Yeah, to make it sit on the page. I kind of agree with you, really. Just as an artist outside of the project, I agree with you. To the degree that if I was totally uptight, and lucky for you, I'm not, I'd say figure out how to draw the shadow the way it would look in the real world. And that would be a whole, if the photos had that data, if the photos really included a shadow, then I would have copied it as loyally as everything else. And I think that would have pushed it one notch further. But if not, I might have faked it, which wouldn't be too easy to do. Rachel, you did a great job and you should feel very good about it. I'm just pointing out that one element that it isn't clear really to anybody but us that was an object that was observed and translated in Illustrator. It feels native to Illustrator almost, like you invented it and it's going to head into an animation. So I have to say, very well done. This little thing, I do agree with you, is a good design element, but it's almost exacerbating another issue that this has. I still think it's top shelf by and large. I love the way they relate and the color and the shapes. It's all there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I got to tell you something, and I hope you guys could hear this, because some of you, whether you want to or not, are going to wind up being professors one day, teaching something just like this. This is the assignment that would have killed me when I was in college. This is the one that would have blown my mind. That would have made me doubt that. I had teachers do this. Of course, we used physical media in the 80s when I went to college, but we did have these super high rendering kind of projects. And the whole idea of emphasizing that it's a rendering, really want to show it off, that it is indeed. I hope you all know that what I mean by that term. You're rendering something from the world is a stretch. I was a cartoonist, by the way, at that time, back then. So here we've got the, utterly super duper convincing sewing machine. And I love the way that the whites, we know this is a white sewing machine, right? But we're a bunch of artists. You look closely, you could see it's actually kind of bluish. Not an uncommon thing. White often really absorbs colors that are near it. Surely you see a white object outside, it's naturally going to acquire a certain amount of blue from the sky on most days. It's interesting, this is an indoor object, and yet that blue makes perfect sense as a background. The bluishness of the white also makes perfect sense. There's some really clean white to show it all off on the knobs. I think this really works out. By the way, about that whole argument about shadows, I didn't require shadows or anything, right? So some of you chose to include shadows, some of you chose not to. Truly though, if this object did have a shadow underneath it, it would have had to be super realistic for us to buy it. A shadow directly over this you'd never see because it's a rectangular base. The shadow would be underneath. A shadow on an angle you would see. So then it would be pretty interesting. I'm not sure that would have helped this one. I sort of like the way it is, just floating in the blue void. I do want to ask or mention a couple things to Laura. Laura, where are you? So something, I love what I've seen so far, and yet I'm probably going to have a critique for almost everybody with the hidden word in critique, which is like critical. So I don't like the word critique. I'd rather be a discussion. but about that, I want to show you one thing. So this here does come off largest, right? But barely. Really like, at first glance, this and this seem the same size. Once you give it some thought, this one's larger. You look at this one and this one, they seem the same size. And they probably are if I move this up here and lined it up. But then I have to ask about this. Does this feel the same size? Like if this is the top of the sewing machine, it looks to me like it would probably end about here on this one. So that basically means you've got 3, possibly 4 different sized objects on the one page. So this is what I want to say to you about that, right? If you have a motive for making something a different size, you got to make sure it's clear as a bell that that's artistic license. And if it's not, then they have to feel like they're the same size unequivocally. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's confusion. So I have to say, this is a beautiful project. You're going to get a high grade, right? If you ever have to do this again, right, you either want to go either of 2 ways. I got to tell you, those of you who are going into manufacturing industries, I want to talk to you for a minute. Like if you're the person who's going to do the drawings of a toy before they're going to build it, and they need high rendered 4 views of that toy before they build it, a very realistic situation that most of you have the skill to do now, right? They're going to want them exactly the same size. Exactly. They're not going to want no artistic license. They're not going to give any room. In my class, you do have room to make a good looking page, but as long as it's not confusing. Do you understand what I'm saying? Right? So I have to say, I think this looks beautiful. It makes a really strong page. I almost didn't want to say anything about it because the page is so harmonious. It's such a calm looking thing, right? So I'm not really asking you to change it, but I am asking you to see it. So I think this is beautifully, beautifully done. A level of skill I'm not sure any of you could have imagined having just a couple months ago. So here's Juliana's, she really kind of worked closely with me. Let me make this a little larger. Hang on a second there. I want to open this properly. Give me a second there. It's still doing that. All right, let me just zoom in a bit. There we are. So she couldn't have chosen a harder object to do. And she'd actually consulted with me before embarking on this or whether it was okay. And my original answer to her, and it would have been to anybody, was maybe not, right? And I had 2 reasons. One, expected, one not. The first one was, is it really clearly about views? Like a dress is, especially a dress like this, which has so many organic qualities, I don't really think of it in terms of separate angles. So I wasn't sure it was going to help her on this project. She'd already done a little of it. And I thought, wow, it's just going so well. And it was so interesting that I said, all right, let's go for it. Let's go for it anyway. So if you look at it here, sure enough, there is a back view. There is a side view. And even the top view looks clearer than last time I saw it. I could see the necks there. Right, so here we've got our headless mannequin in this really elaborate outfit. It's a symphony of texture, though. My God, the amount of surfaces on this, really, Juliana, I got to tell you, if someone called me tomorrow and said, hey, Ira, we have this job for you, we're going to go into production over this dress, I would say, send me a photo. And then I'd probably call them back and say, not me. Nope. At least now I have someone to send them to.
Thank you.
Really, really well done. I really don't have much in the way of critiques. We've got one that's much larger, right? This one breaks the rules, but the other 3 feel like they're the same size. So we know that this one is made larger for an artistic reason. It's visually obvious that she chose the front view as the star, and it made the whole page work really nicely. Hey, I want to throw something at everybody that's kind of worth it. The last few we saw had very nice negative spaces between the objects. I didn't point it out, but they were really beautiful. This one also has really interesting space between the objects. And the more you get used to always looking for that and seeing it, the better you're going to be. But I just want to add, I love the way this ribbon-like thing adds to the movement of the page. I mean, this one swoops down, it even gets caught up by this one and comes right up the star of the show on the right. And this one also joins in and brings us over to the star of the show. Really, very, very nicely done work.
Thank you.
I'm glad I supported you on this one. It was
Yeah, me
close.
too. I love doing it.
You did? It looks
Yeah.
like maybe 1,000 hours of work.
Probably close, yeah.
Yes. Ouch. All right. Well, whew. Okay. Brave person. Beautifully done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You know, I really, really like this one. June, where are you? I mean, sorry, I hit everybody. There you are. Hey, am I saying your name right? I keep saying June, but I never asked.
It's Joan.
Joan?
J-O. Yeah, Joan.
I should have asked you at the beginning of the semester, not at the end. Now I have to apologize for the 100 times I said your name wrong. So
That's
Joan,
okay.
all right. Anyway, I love the clarity of this. You know, I happen to have, mine never work, but anyway, different subject. It's just so clear. The white background looks so great. Look at this one shadow too. Very subtle, right? But there's just no doubt that this is a real three-dimensional object. And even up here where they're floating, it just looks great. I think these three objects here, this is clearly a side view, right? Is obviously the side view of this object, the exact size. This one here, one could argue with her a little bit about it because we could actually measure from this edge to this edge and see that it's narrower than this edge to this edge. But frankly, I'm not that picky because it's not at all distracting. You know what I mean? If we were working for the industry producing this, they might say, oh, hey, Joan, you gotta, you know, resize it so that they're exact. But we're not working for that industry. In terms of the class, I'm concerned is it distracting or not? And it's not. This makes this sweet line along the top. And this very subtly handled couple of objects here where she actually took these out. I think this is just pretty darn perfect, really. Like I said, you know, some industries would say that the width of this one and this one has to match, but I'm cool with it because I just think it sings as a whole. Beautifully done.
Actually, I couldn't finish the it's not like finished yet.
Really?
Yeah, I couldn't I didn't have time.
Really? So I
Yeah,
gotta
I
say,
wasn't
you did a
I was in
fantastic job. Did any of you see this as unfinished? Gee, I just turned the lights on. I'm taking you for a walk. I think it's just gorgeous. And if sorry guys, everything's so weird today.
I was in the hospital last
Oh,
week.
oh, that's right. You wrote me.
Yeah.
And how are you?
I'm
How do you
good. I'm
feel?
good now.
You are? Ah, that makes
Yeah.
me so happy. So, you know, I wrote you in the hospital. My opinion was forget school. You're in the hospital, forget school. But I know that's not your style. So listen, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm very glad you're healthy. And you did beautiful, beautiful work. So if you do finish your upgrade, send it to me. But
Yeah.
I'm very pleased with the way that it is. So you have no worries.
Okay.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
You're very welcome. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So, you know, I really want to be honest about this one. The artist has been struggling. He's always asked, you know, really trying hard, very, very earnest. And I think it's going to take you a little while to get the hang of this. I think you could see that it's not at the level of the work we've seen so far. And, you know, that never feels good, but one has to be braced for it. You know, some of your projects are going to be your best and some are not. I don't think this one is your strongest work right now. And there's some things I have real doubts about, like there's white strokes around the windows and there's white strokes around these slats and these windows, and it's hard for me to imagine that this object actually had them. The texture and the light is working rather well. That's why I think this particular view is the best of them. And this view here is also getting kind of nice, but there are a lot of elements that seem just sort of random. For example, if you look at this side of the house, the oval's beneath the chimney, and then there's two ovals beneath it, which were probably on a straight line, but they're not here. But even if this was believable, how could this happen? Right here, the windows are in completely different positions. So, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that some of this stuff was guessed at. And the thing I'm most curious about is this yellow object on the top, which I can't identify at all. So, I just want to be honest about it, that I know you have a lot of earnest behavior, you're a very serious student, and I have no doubt you're going to learn whatever you need to. Illustrator's definitely going to take some more work from you. This one's definitely not your strongest work, to be blunt. So I'm always open to revisions, as I say each time. You handed the work in on time, and if you want to and you can do a revision, I would welcome it. So I want to show you guys this much closer because the boots are so small. They're so beautifully done. Look at the texture on this side of the boot and how each one of these studs are, they feel like pearls almost to me, just a lot of attention to texture, and the quality of it is really, really fine. And also the surprising pink background works really well. I'm not sure it's the first color I would have thought of for something like this. This is one of the reasons why it works so well. I can't help but wonder one thing. Where are you, Hadassah?
I'm here.
You're here? Oh, there you are. I can't help but wonder if they really needed to be that small, or if there wasn't some arrangement that was going to make them, really stand out. It kind of reminds me, if you were in a band and one person was particularly great at this one particular part, you might ask the other band members to get quiet so they could step front. Or if you had a little choir and one person could really sing, you'd want to make sure to give them a solo. In this case, you've got this beautiful work and you kind of brought it so far away. It's almost like it doesn't know how good it is. And frankly, if I didn't zoom in, no one else would either. You know what I'm saying?
Focusing on it just like fitting nicely in a straight line, like aligned. But now that you say it like that, maybe I could have made like the side view bigger to get the detail. Maybe the other ones it's had smaller around it.
Yeah, the other thing is maybe they didn't need a straight line at all. Maybe that wasn't the thing. I don't know. Even if these four stayed the same size, like even if we escape that particular question of should they be the same size or not. Let's say you went, because this is, traditionally the way people would do it, all the same size. But I could see them all being a little bit bigger and then just not arranged in a line. You could move them around and see. I'll bet you anything that if these were just a little bit bigger, and then one day you just spent 20 minutes having fun moving them around, at one point you'd be like, oh, this is it. You'd have that aha kind of moment. Guys, I want to say something to all of you, and this is not as the teacher. This is really very much one artist talking to a bunch of artists. When working digitally, now this is very different than working in physical media, but when I'm working in Illustrator, and even Photoshop to some degree, when I get the hard stuff done, for me, the party actually starts. I always have a better design idea later than the one I had at the beginning. I get more and more sensitive to those objects as I move through a project. And then at the end, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I should do this. Or no, not that. Maybe this should go here and this should go here. You know what I'm saying? So this was so hard to render. You went with a very logical, very reasonable layout, and it works. It really works. You should have no doubt about it. But when someone's singing a song, I always want to hear the best version. What if you sang it this way? You know what I mean? So she's got all the work in place. It's really nicely done. Very, very sure of itself. But I think you guys know what I'm talking about. I want to mention something too quickly before I move further. The trick in college for your teachers is most of the time to try to squeeze out a little more. I try to be very measured about that because I don't want to push any of you over that edge. You guys work so hard, and I know my class has been big part of it. But I worked at a lot of art schools, by the way, and I felt the same when I was at Parsons. It's like these students work hard enough. I don't want them to work any harder. I'm concerned, to be blunt, with your mental health and your emotional health, to be honest with you. So if I see a little bit more, I'm going to ask for a little bit more. I'm not going to ask for a mile unless I need a mile. Then I have to just be honest about it. In many of these cases, I'm like, this is beautiful. It's top shelf work. But still, what about being the top thing on the top shelf? You know what I mean? It's greedy, but that's part of art. You know, I don't want to really say too much about the works that strike me as just, you know, not there. You know, this work here is just, there's just not enough for a month-long project. This took a month, you know, so I don't really want to, I realize that a lot of you guys have stresses outside of school, and they really do matter. So I'm never criticizing an artist if I say, hey, this is not your best project, or not even on occasion, I might say not a particularly good project. It doesn't mean you're not a good artist. It just means this time didn't score very large. You might have been distracted by other very important things. But I have to say, this one really does need an upgrade. I don't really want to talk much about it. The colors are very fine, but there's very little about that booth that couldn't have been done overnight. It's a month-long project. So one would have to compare it to the other projects here to understand it. So I have to say that one's really going to need an upgrade. Oh, where? How did this sneak in here? It's an older project. I must have left that in there. Wait a second here. Did I get, oh, I left. Hang on a second there. That was confusing. Now I got completely lost. Give me 1 second there. Just trying to get my way. All right. So this is interesting. You know, there's a lot to love about this one, right? I'm sure Danielle, where are you? There you go. I'm sure people are thinking, wow, right now. And there's been a lot of wow.
Like transfer properly.
Say that again?
The colors didn't really transfer properly. Like, I don't
Oh,
know.
really?
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
why it looks faded and.
You know, it could just be the way it's looking via Zoom at this point. You know,
Okay.
it's on my computer and you're seeing it. I do apologize to you, Danielle, and anybody else who are like, oh, God, I hate when that happens. Gee, I hate when that happens. You know, I got to tell you something about all this, though. If you're going into print, say a print industry, magazines, books, packaging, you're constantly in a state of shock when the colors are off.
Yeah.
In those industries, sometimes you get proof, a proof, you know, a sample first. But sometimes you don't get enough proofs because they're really expensive. So I worked in news and I was in charge of all the photos. So if the paper looked bad, it was my fault. If the paper looked good, it was largely my fault, my credit, I guess, in that case. And we never got proof. So I literally had to get to know the flaws of the printing press. Oh, they always print blues purple. So after a while, I knew that. And anytime I worked with blues, I had to lean them green. By the time they got through the press, I got the blue I actually wanted. Just crazy. And I want to say something to those of you who are not going into ink-based industries, those of you going to screen-based industries, TV, the internet, the movies. TV and the internet are even worse than print. Even worse. You have no idea. For one, Macs look different than Windows wildly. The screens. You can have the same piece out and you'd be shocked. To make matters worse, people change their settings on the computer. And you're never going to see what you think you want to see. It's rough. Anyway, but I understand anyway. Just wanted to mention, just to be real. But I think this page looks terrific. Really, it does. And one thing that I really like is the arrangement looks good. You know, I like the fact that you got a top row and a bottom row, but the bottom row overlaps so that this strap here is higher than the bottom. Say the bottom of this shoe matches the heel of this shoe, but the strap here kind of overlaps a little bit. You know, to be honest with you, I like this layout a lot, and I still feel, you're not gonna like this part. I still feel like you could have played with it a little bit more and it would have been even better. But that is my job to see it that way. You know, frankly, all of you, if you all worked for me, right, and we had like a couple days before press, I'd probably ask almost everybody for a change. And then you would know it had nothing to do with being a teacher. It's just a form of capitalism that's part of art making. What's the most I can get out of this thing before we let it out? I think the drawings are great. The arrangement is really, really good. And it just makes me wonder, again, whether they could be slightly larger and slightly closer so I could activate all this negative space. Like over here, it gets a little less interesting than here. So I
Yeah.
could see when you have relationships, the page feels its best. And then other places you don't. And I don't have an easy, just do this. Not really. It would be about just playing a little bit more.
Yeah.
But look, this top shelf work. So you should know that,
Thank
right?
you.
I'm being very, very clear about that. All right. I'm just on terms of the greed factor. If there was anything more to do, it would just be arrangement because the
Okay.
shoes kind of rock. And by the way, I really appreciate the gradient. A lot of people chose flat colors for their backgrounds. So far, they've looked pretty darn good too. But in this one here, you added a certain kind of air to it. So I think this looks really, really nice. Want to
Thank
one
you.
quick thing. You're welcome. I'm just giving people a little slightly closer. Whoops, at least I'm trying to. A slightly closer peek. Even the gleaming letters inside the shoe. All right. All right. I want to do a couple more. You know, we're going to take a break pretty soon. Claire, this one really worked out. You know, it's funny. I don't think I said anything, but I had some concerns, which turned out not to be necessary. I don't think I mentioned it. You know, my concern with this object was this is a strange kind of object, right? I mean, it was a cartoon, and then it was an object, right? And again, like a couple other of you sort of dealt with that. It always worries me a little bit. Like in the end, will the drawing feel like an object or like a cartoon? You know, and that's really part of the things of it. It's an issue. You know, this one just distinctly feels like an object. I don't think anyone's going to mistake this, especially 'cause this one here, you know, most distinctly feels rather too sculptural to be mistaken for anything else. Also got a very nice layout. You know, love the way the gradient looks behind it. Just beautiful, very, very subtle gradient with that little bit of light it introduces to the page. Is very, very welcome. I'm convinced that the whites of his eyes and his teeth really react even better because of this little light in the gradient of the background. Very, very tight. I really particularly like little moments like this where this mounting part of the lower what's this thing called? Pickup truck. This mounting part here fits so nicely as it relates to this hollow underneath this one. You got this shape here, doing some magic with this shape above it. Really, really nice. Nice work, beautiful color. Very, very fine. I want to just take a peek, just have a rough idea how many there is, well, so I could choose, you know, just take care of my timing. I think we're doing great. We're going to go a little bit further. Let me back up on this one a little bit. See if I can back up on this one a little bit. There we go. You know, before we talk about this one, I just want to mention something. I hope you're not all too tired to be impressed with each other. You know, honestly, like if I took one of you out before the semester started, you know, say week 1, and showed these all to you, I think a lot of you would have been like, "What? No way." You know, but now it's your work, so we're all kind of like used to it. That's what happens when you get good at something. You don't even like appreciate it anymore. You look at the next mountain. Yeah, but look at that mountain. I gotta say, this is a pretty impressive set of work by and large. I know 1 or 2 I asked for a lot more. You know, that's understood. They'll probably rock a different project. But I have to say, by and large, these are rather impressive. I love the feel of this one. You know, that color of the background. It's just so, you know, outdoor. It makes me want to walk at the beach just before sunset or something. You know, and these you know, it has a lot of personality for a project that's mostly about rendering. You know, one thing I'm checking on before I say anything, I just, whoops, oh, come back. There we go. I want to back up just a little bit. I just wanted to see if that was really that close up to the edge. And it looks like it is. So just a small thing, Ashton, where are you? You just help me find you. There you are. Small thing. You know, you have very little headroom on the top, and it feels like you have more room on the bottom. So one thing in general I would say to everybody, always beware of the ceiling and beware of the floor. You know, no matter what you're drawing, you got to be very conscious of the top and the bottom. I could make the same argument of the 2 walls, but distinctly the top. Things feel rather odd when they're like just about to hit the ceiling, you know, and it's the same thing about the floor. So if you're ever drawing a full body, you really got to keep your eye on the feet early. Know where those feet are going to land, you know, before you draw it. so you're not squeezing feet in at the bottom of the canvas. I love this. I think this looks great. And it just turns out you have enough space here. You probably could just lower this down without moving the rest of it. I see you really gave a lot of thought to the design though. Look at the way the heel of this view, this top view fits with the angular view of this shoe sole above it. You got this little roller coaster ride going here, and you got this little arc that fits so nicely in it. So you get this beautiful flow going on. It was really nice. I have to say the one that really my mind is just drawn up by the color on this one. Something about that background just worked really well with the object. But do you see what I mean about the top one, Ashton? So
I do, absolutely.
yeah, it's easy, luckily. You know, I gotta say, I want to be honest. I know that this took a lot of RAM out of your computers. This file's got so much data that I wouldn't be surprised if your computer's slower than you're used to. You know, when I do work, is it just sometimes you don't want to even move anything because like you try to move it and it takes like a minute for the thing to even move. It just, and then you don't like it, right? Then you got to Command Z and do it again, which I utterly hate. And there really is no great solution for that, by the way. You know, just for a moment, if this was going to be your future, you know, lots of intense rendering, I would say about your next computer, 1, get the strongest computer you can afford. 2, get the maximum amount of RAM. That's a choice you get to make when you buy a computer, RAM. And RAM is sort of like short-term memory. So the program you're using will really benefit from having a whopping amount of RAM. The last thing I would add is shut everything else off. Like don't keep Photoshop open and InDesign and, you know, a little movie on the side to sneak peeks at Netflix and some Craigslist or whatever. No, shut it all down. Because when your computer is going slowly, all those things are sharing the RAM and you only have so much. But I have to say, ideally, it's not a big deal to move what are these Crocs or no, like a Tiva around or whatever it is. So I have to say, very well done though. Nice
Thank
work.
you.
You're welcome. All right, I think we'll go about an hour and then take a break. We got a couple more. Let me just zoom in on this. So very, very convincing device. In Alex, I may be the only person in a room. Where are you, Alex?
Right here.
I may be the only person in the room that has literally never played a game with one of these.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a gaming idiot, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I recognized it, so I'm kind of proud of myself. So I just want to say a couple things here. It's very convincingly rendered. I mean, you look at this, it's you know, wildly professional. It really does look like part of an ad to sell this particular device, no doubt about it. I also like the brave red color in the background for this, you know, very neutral, industrial color palette that the object itself has. So he's given it this kind of nervy color back there, which I think works great. The thing that I'm most curious again is about like sizes and stuff. You took a lot of liberties, mostly with this one, right? So that you could get them to arrange together. And you know, really, this is not critical, right? At the moment, this is praise, you know, that you could tell that this, you know, there were decisions to be made about where these things went. And honestly, it doesn't strike me as an easy problem. This thing's so flat and you know, rectangular. Like, what do you do with it? You know, in terms of making the design work, there was nothing obvious to seize on. You know, it didn't have the coolest contour of the objects we've seen today. But I think this was a good decision because it takes us deep into the space. This one's facing us, so it flattens the space. So really over it, I get to dive in. I'm not 100% sure, really, that, you know, this one is doing the most it can do for the arrangement. You know, the rendering looks fine. And as a guy who never handled it, I did get a peek at this one earlier, I have to confess. And I had to scratch my head to try to understand it. You know, so this edge here, is that this edge?
Yeah.
It is. Got it. So this is really, it's the device. It's not the drawing. Obviously, the drawing is just dead on. You know, so you know, that's the reality of it. You know,
Mhm.
I don't think it was this class. Then you guys did a guitar, did you? No, so in my other class, someone did a guitar, you know, folk guitar, standard guitar. When have you ever looked down at a guitar from the top? You know, it's like almost nothing there. So she had that one view of the guitar, and it was just the weirdest looking thing, you know, and it was just so odd, completely accurate, but just so odd because we've never looked at that object in that way. I think you have a similar issue. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
have to say though, if this was going to go into a portfolio, because the rendering is so good, you might want to revisit at least getting this to behave a little bit more from a design perspective. You know, this makes some kind of sense here. So this one becomes sort of the odd image, you know, especially because is it the right amount of distance from this one or this one? Are they split? I think they're kind of split, but it doesn't feel dead on. Anyway, I don't want to talk more about it because you see the issue yourself. And in any case, though, the rendering's killer.
Thank you.
You know, Alex, I want to add something. The object seems so simple that if you showed it to me early, I might have tried to push you away from it. I might
Mhm.
have said, you know, I'm not sure it's enough of a challenge. But again, I'm glad that didn't happen because
Yeah.
you brought it to a very subtle level.
That's what I was thinking when I
Yeah.
first started, but as I like got going, it was like, oh, this is actually kind of hard.
Yeah, and you didn't show the difficult part because you did it with real grace. It's
Mhm.
very elegant, very convincing.
Thank you.
So I'm glad I didn't stop you. And even not that I got a chance. Dude, this is just a killer, isn't it? Really. And you know, I got to tell you something. It's hard to be that impressive in a collection that's this good. Like really, what is it about it? I'm gonna analyze this for a minute, but I just want to find Alexandra because I have such a hard time doing that. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Beautiful work. Alexandra, I'm going to ask you kind of randomly. I could have asked anybody this question, but I want to ask you, if you had to guess how long this took grand total, would you say, was it more than 50 hours or less over the month?
I don't know.
You don't know. So that means a long time is what that means. So I just want to say something to you. I'm going to borrow Alexander's to make a comment about this. Very often when let's say you all became illustrators, let's say everybody changed your mind about the major. You loved my class so much, you all became illustrators, right? You know, when you'd get a job, one of the things you would calculate early is how much time can I afford? All right, so this job's paying $1,000. All right, given my life, given what I expect to get, what's the maximum number of hours? You know, it sounds like a lot of money, $1,000, but not if you spend 1,000 hours. You would have made a lot more money, you know, delivering pizza at that stage because something went very wrong, you know. So then you're thinking, oh, so, you know, the thing is, at school, we don't do that, right? The next project, though, that's upcoming, I give very little stylistic instructions, very, very little. There's nothing in any of it that says, give me a super rendered image. I'll just tell you the name of it. The name of the project is Reimagined City. We're going to talk plenty about it later today, but you're going to take a real city and reimagine it. So it's similar to that city, but in some special way, different, right? So it could be very magical. It could be very, very scary. It could be any number of things, but I'm not telling you what style to use. You know, Alexandra didn't even know how long she took on this, right? So maybe she doesn't want to do it in this style next time. But anyway, let's get back to this. Beautiful. I'm very familiar with this object since we got addicted to baking shows at my house and actually got one of these. The gleam is incredible, incredibly accurate. But I have to say, a lot of people in here, someone got locked out. Give me a minute. Let him in. All right. It's something about the way the objects fit. You know, and in that way, Alexandra deserves a lot of credit for this. But about the layout, you know, she went. Everything is the exact size it's supposed to be. Very traditional. She went in one row. Very traditional, right? But she saw that it worked. Look at the negative space between these two. Just a beautiful shape. And if you look at this one, you could see each pair has that. Just an amazing negative space between them. Look at this is my favorite. as it kind of like swoops around the bowl here. And even on the outside of the page, coming up to the border, the outer space really counts. There was really no reason to take artistic license on this one. You know, the object itself had this shape that was just going to work well. You know, by the way, I want to do, this is the strangest analogy of the day. But when you're learning typography, a font that people love is partially popular because every pair of letters makes great negative space. You put the E next to an F and it looks gorgeous. You put the E next to a letter N and it still looks gorgeous. Those people think, in it, the people who design fonts, they think in more combinations than I could even imagine. You know, what's this letter going to look like next to any other letter in the alphabet? And it's uncanny how some of them get it every time, you know. So it's almost the same kind of idea, as though these were letters fitting together like a perfect word. Beautifully done, just beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, you know, this is a nice little touch added up here, Lorianne. Where are you? Lorianne, are you here? See, a lot of people have their cameras off today, and I'm too tired to push anyone. Is the artist not here? Maybe she's out today and just managed to put the work in. All right, so it goes. Let's just talk it up for a minute or two. You know, I really do like the addition of the text quite a bit. I'm not sure I would have tucked it up that far in the corner. By the way, obviously, if she's not here, I'm saying it for everyone else's benefit, right? Someone's at the door. Okay. You know, by the way, you know, internet connections are unstable, so sometimes people keep getting bumped out just because their connection at home isn't so great today. All right. This is very confident distance from the ceiling and from the wall, no doubt about it. And the only reason I'm suggesting moving it a little bit is because the beautifully drawn shavers are kind of swimming around the page a little bit. So I think I would have pulled this text down as some kind of anchoring element to work more with these. You know, these have interesting shapes. You know, if she was here, I would have thrown out a, not so much a suggestion, just as like a mind model to try to imagine this layout. What if the second shaver was upside down, right? So this shaver here, which is shaped like a letter T, right, wouldn't push the other shaver a mile away. If this one was upside down, right, then I would see them, you know, they would lock more like this. You know, they would have a fitting element. So this letter T would be upside down, so to speak. These two I would have played with more also, because the negative space isn't really helping it much. The renderings are beautiful, the colors are beautiful. It's going to get a high grade. On the other hand, though, that would be what would take it further. Would you take these finished drawings and reposition them until the page just totally sings? I've said this before. When the objects are done, the party actually starts. You know, in an ideal world, your design is dead on from the beginning, but let's be realistic as artists, you know. Sometimes your color's right, your drawing's off. Sometimes they're both right, but the design is off. You know, you don't know which thing is going to be informed by what prior step. But in the end, design is always at your fingertips, at least an illustrator. Still, love the gleam on the plastic here. You know, really convincing sense of light. All right. We'll do one more and take a break. We're an hour in. So here we've got this, you know, this vehicle, very, very clear views, very, very clear sizes, and, you know, very black and white. You know, this artist is probably going to be dying for color by the next image. Samantha, where are you? Oh, I see you. Right. Nicely done.
Hi.
Nicely done work. Can I ask you
I
something?
was struggling so much.
Really, what was the hardest part?
First of all, when I downloaded it, another person with the black heels said, the black color like looks off when I download it, and I was trying to blur the like shade of black when I'm doing the shadows, and they were like acting weird.
Really?
So yeah, and I'm really excited for learning about the clipping mask because I almost lost my mind.
Well, we'll see if that helps or not.
Yeah.
It's a great feature, but you'll let me know if it's magic for you or not. You know, you got to say
Yeah.
though, working with black it's true. It's just not easy. For one, you know, black's just got less information unless you blast it with light, and then it doesn't look as cool. You know, I mean, the power of black is getting down to true black. You know, I want to say like, I'm not your Photoshop teacher, but I do teach a lot of Photoshop. And you know, one thing I often say to people, if you have a boring image, right, and there's no specific poetic direction, like, oh, this is supposed to be bright and shiny and happy, or this is supposed to be dismal, you know, if you don't have that lead on how to treat the photo, here's something else. Make something in there get close to true white, and something else get close to true black. This way you can have a whole range of tones in between, have a very rich document, but the black serves as like a deep, deep anchor that's just could be a profound thing. You know, it's one of the reasons we love black text. You know, the reading you do in life, it's 90% black text. You know, it's worth thinking about. But I have to say, I think you did a great job. You got the angles really well. The things that didn't need a lot of modeling, say like the top view checkerboard on top of this car didn't get it. Where you did need it on the windshield, and particularly next to the lights, you know, works out really well. I think you did a great job. You know, I want to say something to everybody in here though. If I was doing the project and someone asked me what the hardest part is, I want to tell you the part that drives me nuts. I know we all found different methods, but I find myself needing to make my own colors transparent a lot, just so I could study the way the photo looks underneath it. And often I'll fall in love with those semi-transparent colors that I can't keep because I'm going to throw out the photo later. And then when I throw out the photo, those colors are not the colors I wanted, right? They were just me working with transparency so I could see the photo. It's a loop. So sometimes it's like, oh, a low, then I'll get to the final color as soon as I can so I don't have to worry about the photo. But that whole relationship just drives me nuts. Seriously. You know, that I find that maddening, that whole process. But I know others of you found other methods. We're not using transparency. Found other ways to get the information you needed. Anyway, I think this is very solid, very well designed, rather sure of itself. You know, I don't know as a fact if these are a little close to the ceiling, but to be blunt, I feel like they are a little close to the ceiling. And the only reason I'm a little hesitant to ask you to lower them is because you'd have to make this car smaller, right? Because it happens to feel very comfortable with its distance from the floor. Can't go any lower. So if I lowered this car, that means this one would have to be smaller, and you know, we know how that goes. But I have to say, it's subtle and not everyone would agree with me. So I happen to think it's really pretty, you know, brawny piece by and large. It's got muscle behind it. Even if it was hard. Folks, isn't that part of what we do? You know, no one you know, thinks that if you ask Michelangelo, man, I love that ceiling, man. Maybe he would have said, yeah, it almost killed me. Can't tell you. You think Michelangelo was complaining about the Sistine Chapel all those years? You know, actually, I'm only half joking because I happen to know he was. He hated it. He didn't want to work on it. You just couldn't say no to the Pope and expect any more work. He only did it because he was forced. He had a sculpture he was working on that he really wanted to work on. And I think it even broke years later, that sculpture too, which is a weird story. The piece that he liked less became like one of the most famous pieces ever made. But as I've read, he whined about it the entire time. Go figure. Surely had the right. So listen, I did say that was going to be the last one before a break. So I'm going to try to stick to my word. Let's take a 20-minute break, right? There's more to look at. There's one technique to learn. There's a new project to introduce. So we got a bunch to do. Let's take a 20-minute break. It's 4:15, so we're going to start at 4:35. Anybody have a last question for me before we go? You all right? All right, 4:35. I'll see you back here. All right, see you guys. Hello. Boy, that's going to make some boring YouTube video. I left the recording going that whole break. Like 15 minutes of utter silence. I treat it as a little meditation in the middle of the class. All right, folks. All right, let me get right back to screen sharing because we have some more really interesting work to look at. So here I go. Sharing. All right. Looks like I somehow skipped this one earlier. Back up just a little bit. Oh, give me 1 minute. A couple people got locked out. Okay. So again, very, very fine work by June. And I want to mention something that it's worth noticing how stylistic these boots are. You know, one thing that always interests me when looking at work, which is, you know, largely designed to be very realistic, that you can't escape style even then. Even when you're basing most of your decisions on photos, you just can't escape your own style. You know, when you look at Renaissance masters and we talk about the ones that strike you as realistic, uh, and I often mention ones that we all know. I mentioned Michelangelo, I mentioned Da Vinci, uh, but these artists, their work looked nothing alike. You could tell that if they were in the same room with the same model, they all would have done super realistic work, but it still would have looked very much like those individuals. And I think this piece is very much like that. These boots, dare I say, these Doc Martens, oh, look, there's even evidence there, um, are clearly a specific boot. I mean, if the fact that I could even guess the brand is telling. The artist did a terrific job. But also just look how simplified all the shines are. You know, if we zoom in, you know, you could just see how the artist just broke down each shape into a free shape. And whether they drew it with the pencil tool or whether they drew it with the pen tool, nobody's going to care. I mean, these shapes here anyway are very organic. They could have easily been drawn with the simplest drawing tool. It's just about finding the shape, finding the right color. And then when you actually see the entire product, it's very, very original. I also want to say something to the artist. Where are you?
Oh, hi, I'm here. Oh, I don't know if you counted me for attendance. I was having really bad connection.
Oh, let me take, you know what I do? I take screenshots for attendance. So I take a few over the break.
Oh, okay.
And I kind of, but thank you for, you know, reminding me about that. Beautiful job, by the way. You should feel really good about this. And I'm using it to point out how one could simplify a complex thing. But I think the thing that's coolest about it is the arrangement of the boots. I mean, I've been talking about that so much today, and here it's very well choreographed, I might say. You know, a phrase we use about dance. But by the way, for the record, if I'm lucky enough to go to a dance performance, I see it as a designer. I often look at the stage and think, oh, gee, you know, all the dancers are here, or there's one there. Look at that balance. Look at that design, or the lack of it. So, you know, this is very much like that. A wonderful little dance. I love the way, obviously, this curve of this shoe works with the curve of the shoe next to it. But again, all the negative spaces are just right. The amount of airspace is very comfortable. It's just a very thorough thought. Very well done.
Happy that because when I took the photos of my shoe. Like I didn't really think about it too hard, and I was like, oh, let's just get a profile, front, back, and then like a cool 3/4. And I didn't even realize that like, oh, when I put them together like this, it looks so clean and like it just all fits together so magically. I didn't even think about that while taking the reference photos.
Oh, I'm glad you're so honest about that because, you know, sometimes, you know, you drop something down and it's just right. It's a good artist who recognizes if you just dropped it there and it was right, don't mess with it. I hear that. This looks so arranged, though. I really would have thought that you'd move these all over the place to come to this, but just
Oh,
the
no, I
fact that
literally did it in order. Like I did the profile first and the front, then the back, and then the 3/4. And then like when I realized that we had to organize like everything into like the margins, I was like, oh, how do I put these closer to each other? Because I originally did them like really far apart from each other. And once I remembered the margins, I was like, oh, I need to make sure they actually fit. And they just end up fitting like a jigsaw puzzle, and it worked
so
out.
that's the thing, you know, that sense of something fitting and that sense of rightness is really what we mean when we say design about half the time. Design can never be okay. And anytime you're looking at the design of something and say it's okay, you got to realize that is just not design yet. Why would you even think of it as design? If it's okay, it looks like it fell from the ceiling. That's okay. But if you pop things down like this and everything landed like that, it's an artist's eye that's going to recognize that it's working. So I have to say, however it happened, it's an interesting story. However it happened, it sure works. I like it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You got a little out of order. This is so much fun, isn't it? And the funny thing about it is that problem that I mentioned a couple times earlier today, that you're taking a cartoon-like object, say in this particular example, and rendering it. Will it feel like a cartoon when you're done, or will it feel like an object? By the way, I've never mentioned it. I had a pretty elaborate cartooning past. It's a subject that I know like quite a lot about, even though it's not a big player in my current life. I'm an animator. I do a lot of animation lately, so that old cartooning past has come back. But I have to say, for a guy like me who's done both sides of that fence, it interests me when someone takes a cartoon-like object and makes it very clear that it's a rendering. I mean, particularly his head and his shoulders. It's very three-dimensional. Anybody who's going to build this object has the information they need. And even in some areas where it's somewhat flatter, like say on this one on the legs, I still think it's very effective. Furthermore, I want to say something, but I want to find Annette first, because the easiest way for me to get to know people is why their artwork's out. There you are, Annette.
Hello.
I love the way the black background, or the very dark background, I should say, works. It was like a little surprising because you chose such a fun object, fun, playful. These dark colors are not usually what one would think of, but you made a wise choice. It's such a dark color that it makes this very light object just pop right off the page.
Yeah, because I tried out I was originally gonna do a lighter background, then I tried it out and I felt like it just took away from the object. Like I don't know, I felt like it just took away from it. So I decided to make it dark, and I think that helped it.
It looks beautiful, and it's just the right dark too. When you say things like I felt like, I love hearing that. At art school, we almost make it all sound like it's some form of reasoning. When was art ever a form of reasoning? And even if we can talk color theory and say why something pops next to another color, or why this mixes well into a shadow, in the end game, it is all about feeling. And I have to say, you made a surprise choice, but I think it works really, really well. I also want to add, this thin top view looks great.
Thank you.
I would have been worried about it. I mean, not as a rendering, but as a design element. I really would have been worried about it, because it's just such a peculiar thing and so different than the other three. And we've seen the problem in more than one with top views, being a little stubborn from a design perspective. But here, as straightforward as the design is, it's a very absolute design, very self-assured.
Thank
as well as the
you.
color. I think it really sings. You're welcome. I have to say, I just really want to be blunt. This really is wildly undercooked. And if the artist has good reasons for it, they should send me a thoughtful email. I'm very, very open. Life is so weird lately that if someone needs a little extra room from me, I'm happy to give it everywhere that I can. But this is not a month-long project. This is really barely a one-night project. So if the artist has been squeezed for time, poor health, or some other event, some obstacle, let me know and I'll make some kind of arrangement for you. But it needs to be entirely rethought. I want to say something to all of you. I don't know if you notice this, but if a project just goes south for you, just does not work, you know it. And really, how much do you need the teacher to tell you if you already know it? And I think it's just winds up coming cruel if someone didn't sing on a particular project to just batter it over the head. So I tend to do ones that are very far from the mark quickly. The artist already knows, they should reach out to me, tell me what happened. They might have aced a different project, give me a chance to work with them. But I don't stand any reason, there's nothing to gain for the artist or the group for me to spend a lot of time on a piece that didn't, So I want to get to this one. Sam, this we were talking a little bit about this in the past, how I might have stopped him, or I think we actually might have talked privately. Sam, where are you?
Hi.
Hi. Did you and I talk about this separately, or was everybody
We
there?
emailed.
Oh, it was through email. Gotcha. So I have to say, this falls in that category of an object I would have stopped you from doing, but I'm so glad that I didn't, because you just did a great job with it. Like if you'd send me the photos, I would have said, gee, you know, how angular is a hat? I mean, how much really is there to learn by turning a fairly roundish, you know, oval-like object around? But, you know, you really just took it far, and it really did satisfy the project. So we got the front view of the hat, we've got the top view, we've got a distinct side view, we've got a very interesting custom angle. You really didn't pull your punches with the custom angle. You gave me a really unusual angle for the hat. Also, it's worth noticing that that one little touch of adding the band that the hat has to the design of the page was just a brilliant moment. You know, it's so confident in itself that we could easily not notice, just, sense it and beyond with it. Also, really nice negative spaces, a really thoughtful palette in general. The colors are all right there. It's just completely confident. You chose a slightly simple object, but it didn't stop you from diving deep into it. So just say, there are times when that's the strategy, really. Don't go for the most complex objects. Take something simpler and just double your energy on it. It's like taking a magnifying glass to energy and focusing that like a laser beam on it. So I think this just rocks. Beautifully designed, really nice feel. Took a simple object that I didn't think was going to communicate 4 views and the major purpose, and proved to me that it could. So well done. This is really one reason why I hate the whole okaying process, and I've not made it a big part of my class. Some people just must have their work okayed, so they always send me little tastes early, and I kick in, but I'm not always right. We're a bunch of artists. We often do the unexpected. Well done, Sam.
Thank you.
So we saw this already, didn't we? I still get a giggle out of it, though. Right, Claire? We looked at this, didn't we?
Yeah,
Okay.
we did that.
I thought for a moment maybe someone had the same toy, so I just wanted to double check. All right. Let me just find my place here. I got very lost. Oh, is that the end of the list? I am sure that I must have skipped some people. Did I? Did I skip any of you guys? I don't want to miss anybody. None? So is that so? Should I check my chats? I know some people that cameras are not working and maybe it's gone all the way down to the chat level. Take a quick look. Just taking a look. I was keying in a little bit with the controversy of blacks changing, trying to understand what that is. And thank you, Juliana, for explaining it to me a little bit. I have to give it some thought. There's some stuff I could look at. If the problem with the blacks is connected to PDFs, can I ask you a quick question about this? And then I do want to get back to what we're doing.
Before you ask a question, I realize I wrote PDF, but I did upload the Illustrator file to Drive a couple of times and it had the same issue.
Okay, thank you for interrupting me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I was gonna head in the wrong direction. I'm gonna have to keep my eye on that and see what's up with it. If it's always about uploading, then I have to look at that part of it, and see what could go on in that path. All right, I want to say something to everybody in here. So there were a couple that I've asked for more from those artists, and I'm asking them to reach out, and I think I know who they are. Some of them already knew that I was likely to say that. The door is still open, so I don't want anyone to feel dejected, other than the fact that we are heading toward the end of the semester. We got a big project in front of us, and everyone's tired. But I'm not shutting the door on anyone who had a bad project. There's still time for you to get me a better one, and I'd recommend that you try to do just that. And don't feel bad when I praise everybody else, because there's sometimes you're going to be the top of the hill, and others are going to be like, wow, that was not my shining moment, So I do want to say something, though. A lot of you, that was a shining moment. I got to say, if this is a portfolio of what this class is about, it's a highly impressive portfolio. So I want to congratulate you all for really driving your vision and your skill to be able to do what you just did. Especially because some of you might be expressionists at heart. You want to splash paint and get at someone's emotions and not at their reason, and others may be impressionist, and you want dabs of color to stimulate the eye, any number of motives that might have brought you to art school. So I think for some of you, this was a real stressor based on how it conflicts with how you see art. And I really got to congratulate you for bringing your energy to the table anyway. That you're going to learn a lot. And you're going to have a lot at your fingertips as artists through your whole career with attitudes like that. Job well done. I'm very satisfied. So I just got to say. All right, I want to do one techie thing with everybody. We're gonna probably get out early today. And I sorely need it. I was sort of avoiding it, but my sister got very bad health news today, and all I could really think about is this sister that I adore. Hope that she could beat this. There's no COVID. Strangely, our son had COVID. No one else in the family caught it, and he beat it in days. And then she got sick with something else because 2020. That's my explanation.
I hope she gets well soon.
Thank you very much. And I try not to talk too much about personal things in class, but I'm just so distracted.
Yeah, I hope she gets better soon as well.
Thank you. And I'm sure your thoughts collectively are with me as some of you have confided with me that you've had obstacles with your work because of something doing at home. And teachers are humans too. We all do our best. I have to say a couple hours of relief of looking at really good work really helped. Even temporarily, it's energizing. I want to do something with you guys that are it's kind of simple by and large. You could judge for yourself how useful it is to you. Some of you are going to really want it bad, others maybe not. Samantha, I don't know if this is what you were looking for, but let's find out. So if everyone would join me in Illustrator, you could open up any size document for this very small demonstration. I have a short agenda for you today.
Professor.
Yes.
While we're opening Illustrator and waiting for it to load, I have a quick question about it.
Okay.
So a few days ago, I'm not sure how it happened, but something weird formatting wise happened to my Illustrator, and I don't have any swatches anymore. It'll only show me white.
Uh-huh. Got it. So that happens. The plague of the swatch. And I've had it happen on my own computer and have not figured out a satisfying solution, but I have figured out a workaround. So Juliana, when you quit Illustrator and reopen it, does it do the same thing again?
Nothing changes.
So even if you quit, even if you shut down the computer and restart the computer?
Nothing changes.
Nothing. And the only problem so far is missing swatches.
I had a couple other problems, and it's definitely been quitting like every 5 minutes and incredibly frustrating. So I'm not sure what's going on with it.
So one thing I would do is I would open up Creative Cloud and see if there's even a minor upgrade to Illustrator.
Okay.
If there's even a minor upgrade, right away. I'm half tempted to tell you to deinstall and reinstall it, but I'm a little worried about you doing that at this point in the semester.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you need a reinstallation. So
Okay.
even if there's a small upgrade, that would just solve it. Just get the small upgrade and you're probably going to be all right.
All right, I'll definitely look into that. Thank you.
About the swatches, what we could do is open up the default swatches as a library and you'll have access to them. I'm going to show that to you in a moment.
Thank you.
All right, so if everybody would open any size Illustrator document with me, right? First, I just want to say a quick thing about that swatch problem, right? Every now and then the swatches disappear. I've had it come down to just these 3 and the rest are gone. And I really have no idea what causes that. But down here in the lower left are where the libraries are, right? And what I should see somewhere would be the default swatches. Here we are, default swatches, right? Which apparently they're broken down into several sections. So I don't know how default that is. I'm sticking with print this semester. So let's see how similar it is.
Was all you clicked on that little, bookcase library?
That's right.
Yeah, I have something completely different.
So you don't have the bookcase library, or you do?
I have the bookcase library, but there aren't any
There's nothing in it?
There's a couple things in it, but it's definitely not the same as yours.
Oh, there's something wronger than that. All right, give me one more second. I want to just take a quick look while we're on the subject. And then if I can't solve it, you and I are going to try to solve it right after class, okay?
Thank you.
I do want to take a quick look at, there's another way to get at the libraries, and I'm curious if it's going to behave the same way. I don't use it myself. So, you and I better take a look at this right after class. That's, I think, the best way to handle
Okay,
it.
that sounds great. Thank you.
I
So
had like,
everybody, yes, please.
sorry, I had like the same problem a while ago, but I think it went away after I opened like an old project for some reason. And then the swatches came back. I don't know if that would help or not, but
That's an interesting idea. I could
Yeah, I'll
probably,
try that. Thank you.
you should. And Sean, that has a
Problem.
certain amount of reason to it. I want to say quickly, when you make your own swatch, just add one, like you save a color, shows up on swatches. It saves to that one document. So, you open up Illustrator another day, you don't see that new color, but you open the old document, you do. So that means it has some special memory for swatches, and that's unique to a document. So I could see how his method might fool it into opening the original swatches.
Well, I tried it. The
Mhm.
swatches changed, so now I no longer have a white swatch. I just have a bright teal swatch, which
Oh.
isn't even in the project.
Right. So it's probably one that you clicked on and saved by accident or whatever. So that it was worth a shot.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank
you
you
know
for
I will
trying.
come back to this later. I want everybody to join me on the subject of clipping masks, though. So first off, I want to say a couple quick things about it. A clipping mask takes a bunch of objects and limits them into a particular shape. So say you had a photo of a starry night and you wanted to show it in a star. You could clip everything to the shape of the star. So the good news is you could hand out circular illustrations. Oh, here's my little Red Riding Hood, but all the illustrations are in circles. And you could do that. That's great. It's got one big negative though, right? The big negative is it takes all the artwork that you clipped and drags it into one layer. So it pretty much demolishes your layer structure if you choose to do it late. So I want to show you what I mean, but let's start with the good part. I'm going to ask everybody to join me on a simple exercise. Could everyone grab the rectangle tool? So I'm going to make something that looks like a simple brick wall. So I'm starting with one simple brick. And my goal though is I want to turn that wall, I want to present that wall in a circle. So the first thing I'm doing is I drew a brick. By the way, I'm option dragging copies of the brick on my Mac. So I got the black arrow now and I'm holding down option. If you want to do that on Windows, get the black arrow and hold down Alt. So I'm making myself a kind of quick brick wall. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. I got these two rows, so I'm going to grab them both and I'm going to option drag them. Once I have enough bricks, that seems like a better solution. Let me let somebody got locked out. Now here's the idea. If my whole idea is that I'm putting up a brick wall, it's going to be a circle in an article. So some article about the brick wall we've hit as a culture, it's some political brick wall type of argument. And I just want that in a circle, and all the text in the magazine is going to be around my circle. All I got to do is figure out how to get all these bricks in a circle, right? Now, by the way, you could have drawn anything, but it would have to be dense enough that you could tell, is the circle doing its job? You wouldn't want a big spacious drawing with loads of space in it. There's nothing to clip. But let's try the next step. I'm going to ask you all to get the oval tool, the ellipse tool, I should say, which is hiding under the rectangle. You might have to press on it. Guys, I just want to double check I didn't lock anyone out. The bell rang. And it looks like everybody got in. All right, so I'm asking you to switch to a different shape. Now here's the rule, right? The shape on top becomes the clipping shape. So I'm going to make mine a different color just so you can see what I mean. So this yellow circle isn't going to have any yellow, right? That color's there just so I could talk to you about it. Wherever I put it, it's going to act like a window, and everything outside is going to get clipped off. Everything inside is going to be visible. So the first rule is this: the clipping object is on top. All right. Now, What you do next is you select all the objects involved. So that means is if I had a background and I didn't want it to be clipped, don't select it. If I have someone standing behind this wall and I didn't want that person clipped, don't select it. In this case, we want all the bricks and the circle. All right. At this stage, we're ready to go. To get at clipping masks, you go to the object menu. The object menu. And way at the bottom, almost at the bottom, it says clipping mask, make. Pretty darn useful stuff. Now, I got to tell you a little bit about managing what we're going to call a clipping group. So you put a bunch of artwork down, whatever artwork you want, really, right? You put a shape on top, whatever shape you want. And you could even hand draw it or draw it with the pen tool, right? And you clip it. The only problem is if I needed layers and I'd had my 10-layer document and I just selected artwork that included all 10 layers, I just ruined the layers in that case. It all came up to one layer. So the moral of the story is think it through before you do this. Like, I wouldn't use it to keep your artwork in a margin. You know, I don't think I would do that because it's not enough of a motive to ruin your layer structure. You know, I would just draw my margins out with guides like we do in class. And if I had to hide stuff along the margins with matching color boxes or something, if I really had to do that. But I'd be a little hesitant to use clipping masks for that purpose, unless it's a very simple illustration, or unless you already feel like, you know, I don't really need these layers anymore. You know, they're not so important. Any questions? I do have more to show you, but any questions so far? So here's the things you need to know about using a clipping group, a clipping mask. All right, 1, the black arrow is going to treat it like a group. So I'd like you to get your black arrow, click on it, drag it. You'll see everything moves. I'd like for you to, give me 1 second here. I just want to check something under my view menu. There we go. You could scale it. And everything scales. The first question becomes, well, how would I work on parts then? Now, if you remember how to work on groups, which we covered twice, but very light, you know, so if you forgot, I'm going to remind you, right? To work on elements in a group, you have 2 primary choices that I'm going to push. There's actually more, but there's 2 choices I'm going to push. One, my favorite, is use the wide arrow. So if you get the wide arrow, you could click on an object in the group. Let me click on an object to show you. You could do any number of things. You could change its color. You could even drag it. And notice how it behaves when it gets near an edge. Sorry. Get in there. Let me move him back. It clips. I could move it forward or backwards in the stack using tricks you learned before, like command left bracket. So the wide arrow lets me select objects because maybe I want to delete one, or I want to change the color of one, or I want to move one. It also, of course, does its usual wide arrow magic. You know, you could still click on anchors and change shapes if you wanted. The other method is this. If you want just to use tools same as always, you don't want to be limited, say, to the wide arrow. Get the black arrow, and instead of clicking once, click twice. I want to say something about this feature because I've come close to ignoring it this semester, right? This is called isolation mode, and some other programs have something like it. And all it does is it sort of acts like everything else is locked. And the one thing you double clicked is isolated. So you could use any tool you want, black arrow, white arrow, whatever. But just note that everything else on your page is going to be left out. The main thing I want to mention though is isolation mode works on groups of all sorts. So anytime you double click on a group, you could work on its parts like they're not a group, finish what you're doing, and then leave isolation mode. So right here, you could do whatever you want, whatever kind of decisions you want to make. But when you're done, you have to leave. So remember, that gray bar along the top is supposed to warn you that you're not in the document. You're kind of in the dressing room for the actor, right? You left the set, right? So right over here is a little arrow, the white arrow. It'll go to that layer, and another click will just take you into the document. I do have more to show you, but let's just go over a couple quick things. You got to be comfortable with groups if you're going to use clipping masks, right? By default, they create a group, right? To work on a part, keep it easy, use the white arrow. But if that's not good for you, get the black arrow and double click it. How are we so far? Good? All right. But there's some really cool stuff you could do on the main stage. Like, what about a background color? You know, I could have probably put a box first before the bricks, you know, a big one, maybe a big black box, and it would be like a background color. But I want to show you a really odd thing about how clipping groups work. All right, make sure you're on the main stage, right? So you're not in isolation mode. I'll click that arrow here and got back to the main document. Now, this step, you do need the white arrow for, right? So I'd like you to get the white arrow. Make sure nothing is selected by clicking out if necessary. Okay, how to give this a background color. So you're in the main document, nothing is selected, and you sneak up on the edge with your white arrow until it lights up at you, right? You know you hit that edge, right? So the real language is, you know you got to the path. Click it. Now, of course, I could change its shape, but right now we're just talking about color. So make sure your fill box is in front and pick a color. So all you had to do was click on the edge of it. I think that's pretty weird though, because if you remember, the circle was on top, wasn't it? Right? It became the window itself. It was the clipping object. And yet the way the clipping group's going to treat it, it treats it as the background. Weird, but useful. While I'm at it, you could use any skills that you've already learned about the white arrow. Here's something from way back at the beginning of the course. So if you're really comfortable with these direction lines, there's all kinds of stuff, whoops, one can do with the clipping object itself. By the way, Valentine's Day, don't send anyone a heart that looks like a brick wall. Don't think that's going to fly. All right, anyway. Does anybody have any questions for me about clipping groups? It's a weird day to put it. It's just that I had it on the schedule several times that we didn't get to it. So, you know, by the way, about the kind of illustrations you guys did, I want to mention when I've used this professionally. So I had to draw a car with people in the car, and it was kind of hard to draw the people in the window. Like, you know, really, do you cut the head off at the window? It was just easier for me to draw the people. You know, just deal with that, you know. And afterwards, I use the shape of the window as my clipping mask. So in that case, yeah, it was really helpful, you know, and that stuff was designed to stay on one layer anyway. So there's no problem. So it's just one idea. As you could tell, it's often used for things that look like logos or icons and that kind of thing, but it's endless. All right, if there are no questions for me, I really don't mind. I know everybody's got lots of stuff on their mind. Any questions for me about any of the above?
Is there a way to draw inside the clipping mask? Because that's what I wanted to know how to do.
Yes.
It looks like weird because the layers are like I was so confused about the layers.
Yeah, clipping masks are the enemy of layers. You know, I really wish I could tell you that wasn't true, but it just, the way the technology works, apparently it has to suck that stuff up onto one layer. I'm a layer fanatic. I have lots of layers and they're all named because I just get dizzy with it. So I name everything, lock everything. So I'm pretty slow about this, but I do want to answer your question though. Yes, you can add objects to the clipping mask. I could draw and add it. I'd like to show you all how to do it. Well, it's a perfect day for it. You know, it'll help me share some trick I've been wanting to share with you anyway. If you'd like to do that, just add any drawing anywhere over the mask, and we're going to figure out how to add it. Right? So I'm going to add this circle into the mask. Now my mask shaped like a heart right now, but that's fine. The method I like best for getting an object to be clipped after I already made the mask is a specialized form of cut and paste, right? The cut is the one you know. The paste is one that I haven't taught you yet. And here's the way it works. So that object does have to at least overlap the rest of the group, but then use Command X to cut it out. Quick word. Everybody knows copy and paste, but not everybody knows cut and paste, right? So copy and paste leaves the original unless you paste a copy. Cut and paste gets rid of the original. So that's what we just chose, but it's in the computer's memory. X looks like scissors. It's an easy way to remember. X is for cut. All right. Now you don't use the usual paste. There's a trick in Illustrator, paste in front or paste behind. I happen to really love it. And the way it works is you select a specific object and then say whether you want to paste in front of that object or a different one. I'm going to use the white arrow. So I got my white arrow here, and I'm going to choose a random brick. To paste in front, Command F or Control F. I bet you could guess what paste behind is. You're right. Absolutely right. Command B would send it behind that brick. Command F would be in front. Here I go. So here's Command F. Oops. Right in front of the brick. This is Command B. Right behind the brick. And beautifully, it goes behind the masking object, and that's why it gets included. Samantha, is that helpful?
Yes, I'm so glad I learned that.
So listen, I want to share a trick with you all, and I'm a little nervous about this one. This is so not conservative, but just one way to deal with margins. You know, because margins are a hassle. In a lot of fields, people will tell you, don't worry too much about the margin. It's going to be cut off when we print. And okay, I get that. They call it a bleed in that case. The thing could just bleed right off the edge of the document. But I'm easily confused. I need to see that margin to make my decisions. So I'll often ignore that advice and fake a margin. I want to show you guys something. You don't have to join me on this. I just like to show you this. So I'm going to open up a separate document because some of you might want to use this trick. So say I had this page and I was told I have to have the margin, right? And let me just change some stuff for a minute. So I'm going to set up my margin. Give me a second there. What am I doing? Hang on a second there. Very distracted today. There we go. So I'm just setting up the margins right now just to make my point. All right. Now, let's just say I had a load of stuff on the stage, right? I'm not going to make a big deal out of what that stuff is. So I'm just going to do a simple, something simple just to just make the point. So I'm completely over my margins, right? If I'm the kind of artist that really needs total clarity, I want my margins hidden, for God's sakes, right? Here's a trick that I happen to like, right? It's going to use the pathfinders, right? So here's the way it's going to go. Let me zoom out a little. I'm going to get my rectangle tool, and the color does not matter at all, right? But I'm going to make a rectangle the size of the actual page. Then I'm going to deselect it because I want to make another rectangle. And this one's going to fit inside the margin. And, you know, I'd be very careful to make sure it's just right. I'm going to use the Pathfinder to cut the orange shape out of the yellow one, right? So here we go. Window menu, Pathfinder. You might remember that this one is called divide. So if I select the last two rectangles, right, it's going to divide them in this way. So here it goes. I select the yellow one. I'm going to select the orange one. I got them both selected. You just double check that that's true. There we go. And I'm clicking divide. So it's the wide arrow that lets me select parts when I use the divide button. I'm going to get the wide arrow. I'm going to select the orange part. There you have it. Right. So, you know, I can make that white so it really feels like it. A second here. And I'll admit this stuff off the edge there is a little confusing. And if that bothers me, I even have a trick for that. It really is a trick, though. I want to be blunt. This is, you know, not day-to-day teacher speak going on here. I'll put a box over this stuff, too. But I'm going to use the eyedropper. Fill it with that same gray as the background. And there you have it. This is the way it's going to look in the margin. I want to just double check with you that I'm not going too far. Is that useful for anybody? Does it? So I want to say, maybe I should have shared that with you sooner. It's not really a standard. It's just the way I like to do it. By the way, I would take that shape, put it on its own layer and lock it. Just be the top of the document, one lock layer with a frame. I usually call it frame. This way I could keep drawing underneath it and not have to think about it ever again. Would anyone like me to do that one more time? I could do it very quickly. Don't be shy.
Yes, please.
Okay, here I go, right? Let me get rid of, I'm going to back up just a couple steps. So I've got this messy document. My first issue was to have a way to deal with the margins that's convenient, where I'm not having to draw up against the wall, you know, change where my anchor points are just to get to the margin, which I find very annoying. So what I'll typically do is this, and I'm going to do a better demonstration as fast as it's going to be. I haven't needed it lately, and it wasn't on class's agenda, but I'm going to do it now. I'm going to actually make a layer just for it. I could call it frame, just my own habit, frame. So I'm on that upper layer now. I'm going to get the rectangle tool. The first step is to draw a rectangle exactly the size of the page. So you're always in touch with the size of the page. Then I'm going to draw another rectangle, but this one's going to fit in the margin. I'm going to use it to punch a hole. I'm going to make it a different color just so you can see what I'm doing. What my plan is to take the big white box and the blue box and use this Pathfinder to chop them up, right? We talked about this one and this one in class, so this one's not new. Just make sure you got them both selected. I click this. Then I'm going to simply get the white arrow. Everything's selected, so I'm going to have to click off to make a new choice. I'm going to take the inside box and delete it. So if these guys were not sticking off the edge there, I'd already be done. You know, come to think of it, about that stuff sticking off the document, you guys are younger than me. I'm using an old method. I don't have to hide it anymore. There's a view now just called trim. It doesn't pay attention to your margins, but it does pay attention to the page. View menu, trim view. It hides everything that is not on the page.
So does that mean when you export it as a JPEG or a PNG that the artwork outside of the page won't be there, or it will?
Typically, it shouldn't be there anyway when you export the JPEG or the PNG. You know,
Well,
But-
it has in my experience, but I
as
get
it. So you might be right. So you know, there's different ways to make those things. I want to take a quick look. How do you typically do it? Are you using export?
export, yeah.
Export. So I'm going to go export as. And I'm going to make a JPEG. And the JPEG will just be the wrong size if it keeps it, right? So I'm going to
Yeah.
call this tester. Oh, wait a second. I just heard the door, didn't I? Give me a minute. No. All right. So I'm saving this to my desktop. It's a JPEG. All right, let's see what that looks like. Moment of truth. You're right, right? It's totally wrong. So we got to tell it not to include the stuff off the stage. So give me a second. I want to try something else. That's not good enough. Save for web is a good one. I want to show you something about this. Instead of export as, there's more than one method, but I just want to show you something here. Save for web has this, clip to artboard. So I'm not going to make any changes here whatsoever. I'm just going to choose JPEG because that's what I want, or the PNG. Just make sure clip to artboard is on. And now I'm going to save that. And I'm just going to save over the one that I just made. So it's going to warn me that I already have one. That's fine. Sorry, I'm moving stuff all over the place, cluttered. All right, let's test that one out. There we go.
That's so helpful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So, you know, just for the record, the first trick was just about margins, right? It had nothing to do with export. It just, I'm in a situation where everyone, like professionals will often work right over the margin. They could just imagine in their head how the margin's going to look. But I'm not comfortable with that at all. I want to see it. So I do this punching a hole method. But if you have stuff that's off stage and you're having issues with your export, try that out. File menu, export, save for web. I do want to tell you, I'm not telling you it's the only way. You're going to discover more ways on your own, and other teachers will have other ways. But this is a good one. Juliana, one reason it didn't occur to me first is I work mostly for the web. So I spend a lot of time in save for web. I use export in class, but I don't use it a lot for myself. So I got mixed up. Any case, any other questions? These have been good questions. Anybody? Something been bothering you about Illustrator you want a hand with? Some kind of a, oh, I wish they had this tool. All right, I want to introduce to you the last project. So let's all take a deep breath. One project left. The good news is I don't think it's the hardest project, in my opinion. You might disagree completely. You really might. But in my opinion, the project that we just finished was the hardest one. What's harder about the last one is the amount of imagination it requires. So let's have a look. Get clear up a little bit. Go to my browser. What a mess I have going here. All right. Okay. I think I want to start by just showing you the samples. Right? We'll go into the detail after. So as I've been doing all semester, I choose a few from prior semesters. for samples. It's the first thing in the box. I'm going to go ahead and open this in a separate tab. They're large files, may take a while to load, may not. This is all FIT students. Let me just back up a little bit on this one. Second, having a little zooming issue with Acrobat. Let me just open this in Acrobat. Maybe that's better. Give me a second. All right. So the project is Reimagined Cities. Now I want to go right for the gold for a minute. What would the gold be? The gold be is you chose a city, right? And analyzed the character of that city. Then you took that, some element of that character and reimagined it. So in other words, you emphasized it, you made it crazier, you made it wild. This is what Salvador Dali thought about that element, or this is what space aliens thought about that element, or anything. But it should ideally start with the city. Now, New York City is one of the most famous cities in the world. And now that you live here, you know what it's really like. But you go back home, they may have their own image. I've known people who thought all of New York City is populated by muggers and drug addicts. That's their vision. I've known other people who think it's all about Broadway, like we all walk around with top hats and we dance in the streets. Totally different points of view. But honestly, they both are part of the character of New York City. They really are. And if you're in a dark mood and you want to do the dark version of New York City, you're going to reimagine it as the city of muggers, where everybody's out mugging each other. The muggers are mugging the muggers, right? Let's say you're all about Broadway. Everyone on the street, they got a cane, they got a top hat. The guy driving the bus tips his top hat. You know, everyone on the bus looks like it's Broadway, right? But how many other ways are there to see any city? So if you look at this one, this artist was worried. Well, let's not say worried. His vision of New York City was a place falling apart. You know, and I can understand that. I don't know where he was living in the city at that time. But I know that there's parts of the subway that are completely ignored. So in this particular version of the city, it's just completely fallen apart. Even the Statue of Liberty is on the ground in a pile of rubble. This person chose Havana. And something I should have mentioned about the last one, let's get back there, is it has to say the city. So this artist chose to make a traffic sign, you know, welcome to New York, copied the look of the local signs. This person's doing Havana, the most famous city in Cuba. And terrific drawing. Notice the stylistic difference, by the way. The last one was morbid and a little more detailed. This one's very bright and simple. It's more about a certain level of charisma. And it says Havana on the ground. That's not my favorite part, even though it's kind of cool. It's a little hard to see, but I still think it's an A project. They got the kind of buildings that are in Havana. Havana's known for Cuba in general, for keeping really old cars around. You know, their economy's been very tight and they've had problems with we don't do trade with them. So a lot of reasons they keep old stuff and they keep it beautiful often. It's got this old car. In the 60s, there was the Cuban Missile Crisis where Russia had put missiles in Cuba and aimed them at Florida. It's a big deal. And also Cuba's famous for its music. So what's going on in both of these? Once you pick a city, right, which you'll do by the next time I see you, right, you're going to analyze the city. What's the character of this city? Who lives there? What do they do? You know, I love the guys in the street who sell the hot dogs. I'm a vegetarian, but I love hot dog stands. It's so New York, the hot dog stand. The pizza places. I mean, how many pizza places can New York have? You know, in a reimagined New York, maybe there's nothing left but pizza places. But I don't know. This person, when it came to Havana, they learned about the Cuban Missile Crisis. They wanted to reference it. They learned about the architecture and the cars and the music, and they wanted to reference it all. Let's see what else. This is a wild New York one, really. This artist really, this looks like so much work, but she had a very developed imagination and treated it like it's a website. I never even heard of Little Brazil, so there must be a part of the city where the Brazilians are hanging out. I really don't like this little bit of type, I have to say, because it's so hard to see. But I do like it otherwise. Incredibly complex view, as though the bottom of the city was made of glass. So she's imagining the city from the underground. It's not the way I pictured this project, but it's kind of brilliantly done. You know, I love this project, even though I have a couple arguments. Look, folks, I confessed to greed earlier when looking at your beautiful project 3. I kept on talking about, well, how would this great thing be even better? Right? My argument with this one is that he's referencing Las Vegas and a town nearby called Roswell, but he's reinventing Las Vegas. So I have some conceptual problems with this one. Las Vegas is known for gambling. So it bothers me here that there's no reference to gambling at all. That bothers me. Roswell is a town in Nevada, and they're both in Nevada, where people believe space aliens had landed. And people still believe that. And a general had made a call to a newspaper, and then the next day he denied it, that they'd caught an alien. So people are still looking at Roswell. I love the idea of this sign. Extraterrestrial space people are welcome to this space Vegas. I love that idea. The only thing that was a little weak about it is, what here says anything about Vegas? It's flashing lights and all of that. There's just not enough of it. I have to say, though, it's beautiful and it's fun and it's scored on so many levels that I chose to show it to you. I think if this artist really wanted to nail it, they would have just put one gambling machine somewhere on this planet. The famous one where you pull down the arm, 3 lemons is, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's something. You know what I mean? You can tell I don't gamble. But that would have just pushed it over the edge. It's wonderfully reimagined. It's got some references to Vegas, famous Ferris wheel, dollar sign. Just need a little bit more. But other than that, it's just beautiful and professional and fun. It should be fun. Let me get this to move. Sorry about that. There we go. So here we are in Germany, right? And the artist went very straight up, right? There's no magical stuff. They're just reimagining the tourists' favorite parts of Germany and kind of treating all of Germany like that. And the most reimagined element, which I do really quite like, is it's inside of a beer mug. So I'm a little confused because they chose a lot of cities to reference, right? The project's really about one city, not one country. But I'm not that uptight. They got the spirit of the assignment in a deep level. It's very much German. And they list a bunch of cities just to make sure that I'm covered. They got the architecture beautifully rendered, very simple, but clean and clear. Some fun with the type. We're going to be learning more about type next week. How to put type on a path like this, for example. And the nicely drawn beer mug. We back up a little bit more. There we go. It's very interesting. Reimagined. You're not going to see a city in a beer mug. This is one of my personal favorites just because it's got such a light touch. And it's surprising. It's a little bit dark, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels playful. San Francisco is famous for so many things, but amongst them, earthquakes. And you have to be worried about earthquakes if you're going to live in San Francisco. And they had at least one famous one that burned down a huge chunk of the city. People there, I think they just tend to like, But in this particular one, the artist had a very hard time drawing the damage. So I remember her showing it to me during the draft period. She had beautiful houses, very simply drawn. Notice how they're copies of each other. Right? This is really all the same house. Right? You just move some windows around and change the colors, but by and large, it's the same house. So he really saved a lot of time. but didn't know how to make the broken house. They also drew a fairly nice bridge the first time and then redrew it, got a better bridge, but couldn't figure out how to break it. So really all the effort was how to put some of the houses on tilts, tilt one over and grab some of its parts to drag off, how to draw a hole, which by the way, I think she did a great job. Look at the way the grass comes over the edge of the hole. You know, here we're looking through the grass and here the grass is actually caving in like maybe they're roots. And the broken bridge worked out fairly well, right? She pulled it down, kind of gave it a strange shape here that's unstable, moved some straight lines, it feels like cables or girders, and over here literally took some stuff out. And very convincing earthquake. I find it fun because we often make art about dark things, playful art about dark things. You ever listen to reggae music? It's so happy. It's such happy music until you listen to the words. It is like half the time it's about someone crying or slavery and all these intense subjects. And it's something artists have always done. They mix fun things with dark things as to kind of fool the audience, really, into taking on these subjects that they might push away. And you'll see it in movies, you'll see it in illustration, comics. So I have to think this is very smart, smartly made. Let's move on. Did I skip one? Here's another American city. Give me 1 second here, guys. New Orleans in Louisiana. Famous for many, many things. Famous for excessive drinking. Famous for wonderful live music and American jazz. Famous for French-looking architecture like these buildings. And also famous for the terrible hurricane, Katrina. And you guys were kind of young during Katrina. Sorry, it's got cold in here. So I don't know if you remember it, but it almost wiped out chunks of the city. And so they did this beautiful water in Illustrator. That looks rough to me, really. They found a great way to use brushes and transparency and floating different things in the water. I really love this one. I gave it an A. I'm only showing you ones I gave an A, even though I'm pointing out their problems. You know, even though, like, what would have made me even happier is if she included more Louisiana stuff. So I'm not relying on the sign to let me know that I'm in New Orleans. And she did, but not enough. Like, these are Mardi Gras beads from that famous parade they have. And they often have fireworks during Mardi Gras. And I bet if I look closely at the water, some of these things are probably Louisiana stuff. But I love the style. It's unique. It's different than what we've been doing all semester. It's thoughtful. The water's just really beautiful and playful. Nice project. Move some stuff over here. So this student was from Korea, and he was saying that where he comes from, Seoul, in Korea, he was telling me that really all he sees on the streets are food delivery guys. And Rex was the artist, and Rex was telling me that these food delivery guys are carrying these things to deliver food, and he's reimagined the city as just utterly dominated by these food delivery guys. You know, I think it's kind of interesting that he chose this really old, traditional looking character to put on the bike, you know, like the kind of beard he has. I don't think the young people are doing like that. Maybe somebody's grandpa or something like that. But, you know, he wanted to bring in some of the tradition to this very modern situation of the food delivery guy. So he's got the modern buildings in the background together with the antique building, clearly important to him, how he sees this city. I'm pretty sure I know he's from Korea, but I think he's from Seoul. He knew it well. So he's talking about this leap across time. And I have to say, I love this art because it's very professional feeling, very quirky, really makes you want to know more about it. He even got very specific about this odd piece of architecture, probably famous there. And he took some artistic license that I had mixed feelings about. I just like the result so much. But about the artistic license, this is a famous river. And he had to tell me that. I thought it was some kind of weird blue sidewalk. And I get that it's you know, almost an icon of a river, sort of, you know, definitely symbol for a river. But I have to say, you put it all together and it's just fun. He gave me the name of the city, even included it in the language of that city. So I think it's really nicely done. This one I really have to show you. I'm a New Yorker, by the way, but I'm not that offended by this guy's view of New York. Give me a second. This fella always turned every project into his own thing. So even sometimes he gave me a little less in one thing that I wanted, he'd always give me more than I asked for elsewhere. I really was kind of hoping for a landscape, you know, a reimagined city, but he's showing me the feet as an expression of the city. You know, he just did it so well because he had a dark view. Garbage. So these beautifully drawn cigarettes, look at these things. They're so beautifully done. Ugly objects, beautiful drawing. Even a beautifully rendered lottery ticket on the ground there. Chewing gum, you know, here's banana, he's got the peels all over the place. Of course, gorgeous boots, but that doesn't surprise me after the third project, you know. Everybody learned how to render. So he's sort of looking at a tile floor that's been just totally messed up. I do like the thought of using the graffiti to tell me that it's New York City. I really admire the originality of this one. This file's so large, it's very stubborn when I try to change pages. Let me make this one a little bigger. Fujian is not a place I know anything about. So I can't really give you any insightful comment. I just thought it was sort of beautiful. I love the simplicity of how she drew the Buddha. It's so simple. If you look at this Buddha, she put one gradient in the entire silhouette. And then on top of it, added the lines that make the arms and the face and the rest of it. Some white for the gleam and a little bit of shadow over here. But it looks like there's one gradient that just filled the whole silhouette. Very smart. And here we've got mountains and smoke. And if I knew more about this place, I could comment on it a little bit more thoughtfully. I just wanted to share it with you because I thought it was kind of beautiful. Nebraska. I hope you guys are getting a feeling for this project. You know, I want to step out and go over some details of the project itself. But wait a second. Oh, for a minute, I'm so distracted. I thought I kept you over class. I'm like, wait a class. Doesn't this class end at 5:40? That's my other school. All right, we're okay. Nebraska. So the student had come to New York City. She was coming pretty urban, if you ask me. But she took her hometown in Nebraska rather seriously. And she reinvented some American stuff to create Nebraska. And she okayed this with me before she went too far. I thought the idea was so charming. So here we've got, of course, the Statue of Liberty done Nebraska. I guess they have a lot of cows there. You gotta love what she's holding in her hand. So instead of a torch, she's holding a corn, and she's surrounded by growing corn in Nebraska. And by and large, though, I think the colors and the fonts just create a very complete look. It's very much a postcard. And for me, it's like a postcard from the 1950s. It's got this antique kind of vibe as she sort of joined this town in Nebraska that is important to her with her vision of this New York City into Nebraska. Very original. I want to say for the record, I'm really interested in originality now. Really, you know, I never really set out in my life to just teach techniques to people. You know, technique is great, but the bottom line, what's going to make you matter to us as a species is your originality. You know, whatever field you go into, that fresh air you bring into that field as an ambassador from your generation, from your history to this moment in time. So I'm really interested to see what you come up with as an individual. So here we are, we're in Beijing, and that's a bit of a problem because the font is just so small on the chopstick. It would have been much better, I think, if she kind of integrated the name of the city to the bowl. But other than that, I think it's just terrific. You know, I think I think if I was Chinese, I'd get a little bit bored about everyone thinking of China as, oh yeah, I love Chinese food. At a given point, I'd be like, shut up. You know, the culture brought so much to the world. And yet, you know, a lot of Americans, yeah, here, Italy, they think pizza and the, you know, Chinese food. So she put the entire place in the bowl, which I think is great. This is part of the Great Wall of China, nicely drawn, kind of took a lot of liberties with that to fit it in the bowl. And it's a totally reimagined city that lives in a food bowl, which I think is pretty cool. Here's another really exceedingly dark New York image. Very much focused on New Yorkers and drug problems. So this here is like a crack pipe and the tiles are falling apart, like a reference to the subways that sorely need work. And kind of emphasizing that it's not the tourist town that people might think. You know, you can go anywhere in the world and buy a snow globe. You know, I was in India in this area that's rarely under 100 degrees and they were selling snow globes. So this one here's got a snow globe with the city in it, the decrepit wall behind it, and got a beautifully rendered glass pipe, you know, beautiful ugly, if you know what I mean. And even the snow globe is not particularly pretty. Very professional, very original. Look, before we look at the details, does anybody have any questions, general or specific? Is it too soon? Maybe?
Are all we doing next week is going over concepts, or do you want us to have sketches?
Sketches. So I'm going to go over that detail right now, but all I want by next week is sketches. Look, the biggest mistake an illustrator could make is to start working without sketching, you know, without thinking. So I have two processes to help you think that I'm going to go over, and I want them done as thoroughly as possible for next class. And as I said, it's sketching, it's thinking, it's not uptight stuff. You've got a little bit of a break from any heavy duty illustrator work. So let me show you the handout.
I have a quick question.
Oh, please.
So like for New York, could we do like Brooklyn or Queens? Like, could we just do a borough instead of the entire city?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good question.
Thank
Good
you.
question. You know, I got to tell you something. I'm going back and forth all the time about what's healthy for you guys in terms of restriction. You know, it's well known that art schools work because of restriction. You don't have the free reign you do making art for yourself because you probably won't in the professional world. So a lot of restriction. But sometimes we overdo it. So I have to say, though, if you have any questions, you got to make sure to answer me if it's something unusual. That was a fair question. I mean, one reason it's easy for me to say yes to is New York City is so big, it should be a state. And the rest of New York State should get another name. You know, Brooklyn is New York City. When you're here, when you live here, you say the city, everyone means Manhattan. But everywhere else in the world, Brooklyn is the city, and so is Queens and the rest of it. But yes, Micah, absolutely yes. Any other questions? So I'm going to look at the handout, but you interrupt me anytime you want. Okay, let me get that out. All right, so at the end of today's, yes, one more time.
Town instead of a city?
A town would be very much acceptable.
Okay.
I like the idea of narrowing in on a place because I really want you to respond to that place. Look, I love science fiction and I love science, but it isn't enough for me to take any town and just make it sci-fi. You know, maybe if I wanted to do that, I'd go to Silicon Valley in California, where they make all the cool technology and turn that into my sci-fi fantasy. You know, but I also like magic, you know, even old school wizards and stuff. But, you know, where would, you know, so it's really got to be about some kind of marriage, the place itself leading you to reimagine it. That would be the gold standard for me. You know, where something about that place is connected to the way you're imagining it, right? So I don't really want a tourist postcard, you know, that's just showing off the famous places. but it's okay to use that logic if you like. Reimagine. It's a curious word. All right, let's get a look here. All right, so you're going to reimagine a cityscape, but yes, I'll accept a town or a borough based on real world research. So you're going to have to do that research. Because after that, you'll be free to expand on the research. You'll know a lot about the fundamental personality of it. Like, what is different about Rome than the rest of Italy? A lot. A lot. Rome is all about religion and the history of the Catholic Church. The rest of Italy is not necessarily. So if I was going to do Rome, I might want to reflect that. So you research first. Now, your work should show fundamental drawing principles, but not be limited by norms. Hey, that woman who put Beijing in a soup bowl, she had to break a lot of rules to pull that off, and that was good. So this project's the most openly creative project, both in terms of subject and visual expression. In other words, subject and how and technique. Subject and technique. Be imaginative, be thorough, and push it. This is a month-long project, right? And it's the last project. So you should really push it. All right, let's talk about what you need to get started, what you need for next week, right? All right, so I want you to select your place, right? So I'm focusing on cities, but I'm open-minded. I don't really want whole countries though. Select a city, place, analyze it, get a feel for it, but then I want you to gather significant photographs. Guys, listen to me as the old guy in the room. You want references. You always want references. And even if you're not going to file menu place anything, even if you're like, I'm not going to go that road. But seriously, if you needed to do the Statue of Liberty, you're going to do it from your head? You want a New York City cab. You want to make sure it looks like a New York City cab and not, a cab from Berlin, or Paris, right? So you need to collect references. I'm going to ask you to collect photos only. Now, everybody listen. No paintings, no illustrations, no cartoons, no art should be in your reference folder. I want everyone to break the habit of looking at other artists before making your art. I believe you should look at other artists as much as you want and then put it away. So whatever is natural to you, you'll absorb through your skin. But I don't want you looking at Van Gogh and drawing a city unless it's about Van Gogh. It's a big mistake. You won't discover yourself. So I'm limiting the references to photos. So like, let me think. So Paris. If I want people to know it's Paris, the one way to guarantee they know it is to have the Eiffel Tower in there. So I'm going to get a photo of the Eiffel Tower. If I'm having fun with images of Paris, I'll get the beret, the black hat, artists wear it. Right? So I'd get some people in berets, and I'd have to think, what do I need to let the audience know it's Paris, as well as writing Paris, right? Also, it might get me into the mood of that place. What am I trying to say? My favorite thing about Paris is the outdoor cafes. And I'm glad COVID has given this city more outdoor cafes. That's a weird sentence. Can I take that back? I'm not glad about anything with COVID. But I could reinvent Paris as one massive cafe. I don't know. So I want you to gather your references for two reasons. So you have imagery that could help you communicate, you could just look at, but also that you could feed your mind with the spirit of this place to help guide you forward. All right, so you're going to select the city and gather your photos. What is it about the city that differs from others? What's the essence of this difference? A lot of you have traveled because most of you are not from New York. So you know how places differ. And what are you going to choose to emphasize, to illuminate, or just to exaggerate? The real question is this one in bold. What relevant transformation can you conjure? You're a magician. and you're changing this place. So gather your sources. What do you need? Do you need landmarks? Probably. You know, probably World Trade Center or what, Freedom Tower, you know. Do you need local people? You know, food? That's a big one. I don't know. You have to figure that out yourself. You're going to use these as casual references. I mean, look, think, draw, or file menu place. That's all going to be up to you. All right, guys, listen, stay with me. I know it's getting late, but I'm not going to collect that part, the photos, right? You're going to keep it. You may need to show me at some point for a different reason, but I'm not going to collect them. Here's what I'm going to collect next time. I want you to hand sketch 2 or 3, but no less, reimagined versions of the city. So I want you to do your thinking in the sketch. I highly recommend pencil, but any other physical medium you want to draw with is fine. I'd rather you not sketch in Illustrator or in Photoshop. Old school, draw, think out loud, you know, reject this and embrace that, you know. So you could use, I reckon it'd be good to stay at the same size, but you don't have to. This is going to be the actual size of the document with a margin. All right, so let me be more exact, the green part. What do I actually need from you? What am I going to look at? What are we going to look at? So the research folder is the one with the photos. That one I don't want. This one I do want. I want you to prepare the 2 or 3 original hand-drawn sketches. I need to see them, so you're going to need to scan them or photograph them. Now, I have a suggested way, but you don't have to do it. My other group, on their own, about half the class made a PDF of their collected sketches. Some other teacher must have done it in their class because they all knew how to do it. And I was like, wow, that was brilliant. Really easy for me to look at. So any way you could gather them neatly, right, so we could look at them together is a good way. But here's the way I suggest it. Photograph them or scan them, right? Put them in a folder and name the folder this. If you want to give me a PDF instead, then name the PDF like this. This is the usual format. But here it says Project 4 Sketches. If it's a folder, I could open the folder, look inside it at your JPEGs or however you scan them. If it's a PDF, just give me the PDF. I'll look at that. And you're going to upload your sketches folder or your PDF, as usual, directly into the drive. I'm tired, but I have enough strength for questions. So basically, you're just digitizing the sketches somehow in a neat way so that I could look at them and you guys could share them in the breakout rooms. Any questions for me?
Do the sketches have to be of the same city?
That's a very good question. No one's ever asked that. Huh. Well, you know, like I say, if you want to do 2 places just to think it through, could you do 2 of each? You know, I'm open-minded, Sam. It's a good question. I think my original thought was to use the sketches to zone in on exactly what you want. But if you also want to use the sketches just to help you choose, I'm okay with that. Look, just the timing is everything. You know, I'm going to see you guys next Monday. Then the following week, you could guess it's going to be the first digital draft. The way I have the calendar set up, there should probably be a second draft. It's big, this project, you know. And then there'll be the final, and that's that. It's the end of school by then. So just time yourself. You know, if you need to stretch out, do more sketching and thinking, if you can juggle the time, I'm cool with it.
When is our final due?
Last day. So
When's the last day?
yeah, let me get a look for you. It'll take a minute. I usually have my calendar out. Let's see. So this is the 23rd. We got one more week in November. Let's see. FIT last day from Monday. It's the 21st of December.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Guys, your questions have all been very good ones. Does anybody have any more questions for me? So guys, listen, let me wish you a lot of luck, wrapping up in this last month of school. I could see visibly how much you're all learning. So I'm very excited for you. Your whole life, you'll look back at this time and say it was worth it. Right now, I don't know about you, but I'm going to be counting not days and weeks. I'm going to start counting minutes very soon. This stuff is tiring. Why did we become artists? Really? I'm kidding. Anyway, folks, it's been nice seeing you. No last question? Nobody? Joe, I know somebody I said I was going to say with, right, to figure something out. I already forgot. Juliana. So stick around, right? We'll take a look at that. Everybody else, thank you for showing me your beautiful work. The couple of you whose work I complained about, you could do me a redo, right? And I think by now you know how to make it better, right? It's can you gather the energy to do it? You saw what they look like. There's no more I could tell you. How would I make it better? That's big, just, do it, dive in, do something deeper. Everybody else, let's just focus on moving forward, right? So any which way, I'm on everybody's side. Email me if you have more questions. I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. All right. See you, everybody. See you next Monday.
Bye. Have a good
Have a happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.